Welcome to Nikki Woo Cozy Stories. I'm your host, Nikki. Tonight, we return to my cozy adaptation of Algernon Blackwood's Ancient Sorceries with Episode 2, The Old Life. Arthur Vezin came to this quiet French town intending to stay only for one night, but somehow, leaving has become much harder than he expected. And as the town begins to feel less like a place he has discovered and more like a place he has somehow known before, Arthur is about to learn that some memories may reach farther back than a single lifetime. So settle beneath the covers, let the day grow quiet around you, and return with me to the old inn beneath the ruined cathedral. Our story continues. Arthur Vezin did not catch the 8 o'clock train. He didn't even try. By 7:30, he had stopped pretending that he might. His bag was upstairs again, his room had been made ready, and when Ilsa appeared in the courtyard to tell him supper was waiting, Vezin followed her inside without once looking at his watch. It was astonishing how quickly the decision ceased to trouble him. An hour earlier, he had been standing beneath the archway wondering why he could not make himself leave. Now, with warm food before him and an evening gathering beyond the windows, the question seemed almost foolish. Why should he leave? No one was waiting for him in London. There was no appointment he would miss. No urgent business required his attention. For weeks he had traveled precisely because he wished to escape such obligations. And now that he had found a place where he was comfortable, he was behaving as though some railway timetable had the authority to drag him away from it. The thought amused him. He ate slowly. The onion soup was excellent. So was the chicken Ilsa brought afterward, browned with herbs and served with potatoes and a little dish of beans. Vezin complimented her, and Ilsa smiled. "I told you the soup would not burn." "You did. And you doubted me." "I did no such thing." "You looked doubtful." Vezin laughed. "I was distracted." "By what?" He looked at her. Ilsa was waiting. There was humor in his eyes. "By the journey," he said. Ah. She didn't believe him. That was obvious. And for some reason, this pleased him enormously. Ilsa returned to the kitchen, and Vezin realized that he was smiling at his plate. He had forgotten how pleasant it was to be teased. More than that, he had forgotten how pleasant it was to feel at ease with another person. Vezin was not unhappy in ordinary life. He would have objected to anyone describing him that way. He had books, friends of a sort, enough money to travel occasionally, a comfortable home, but he had always moved somewhat cautiously through the world. He thought before speaking, apologized when he inconvenienced people, stepped aside on pavements, accepted the chair no one else wanted. It was simply his nature. Yet here, after scarcely 2 days, something in him had begun to loosen. Perhaps it was the wine. Perhaps the mountain air. Or could it have been simply being somewhere where no one knew him? Whatever the reason, he felt lighter. Younger almost. When Ilsa returned to clear his plate, he surprised himself by saying, "Sit down." She raised an eyebrow, and Vezin immediately lost some of his courage. "If you have time, I mean." Ilsa looked toward the kitchen. Then she sat opposite of him. The ease of it startled him. No awkwardness, no searching for conversation. For a while they talked about ordinary things, the town, the mountains, places Vezin had traveled, and Ilse had never been to England. She asked whether London was truly as large as people said. Oh, larger. And noisy. Much. Then I wouldn't like it. You might. No, she said it with such certainty that Vezin laughed. You have decided without seeing it. I know what I like. And what is that? Ilse considered. Places where you can hear the night. Vezin looked toward the open window. The phrase pleased him. Outside, the town had grown quiet. Not silent. There were voices somewhere in the street, the occasional closing of a door, the soft scrape of chairs from another room. But beneath these small sounds lay an enormous stillness. Yes, Vezin said. I understand that. I thought you would. Again, a simple silence, and yet something about it made him look at her. Ilse lowered her eyes. Why? Why what? Why did you think I would understand? She traced one finger alongside the edge of the table. You are not like the others who come here. What others? Travelers. Vezin smiled. How am I different? They look at everything. So do I. No, Ilse shook her head. They look because they want to remember what they have seen. You look as though you are trying to remember what you have forgotten. The smile left Vezin's face. For several seconds neither spoke. Then Ilse stood. I should help my mother. She collected the dishes before he could answer. Ilse, she paused, but whatever question Vezin had meant to ask disappeared before he could form it. Nothing. She carried the plates away, and Vezin remained at the table. You look as though you are trying to remember what you have forgotten. He thought of the cathedral. Ilse standing among the ruins, the dark dress, the broken arch. That impossible certainty that he had seen her here before. He pushed back his chair. Suddenly the room felt too warm. He stepped outside, and night had settled over the courtyard. A lamp burned beside the doorway, throwing a pool of amber light across the stones, and above him the wooden gallery disappeared into shadow. The air was soft, almost warm, and Vezin stood for a while listening. Somewhere beyond the end, music had begun. Very faint. He couldn't tell what instrument produced it. Perhaps a violin, perhaps something smaller, and the melody drifted in and out of hearing. Vezin moved toward the archway. He had no intention of going anywhere in particular. He simply wanted to hear it better. The street outside was washed in moonlight, not the bright white light of a full moon, but something softer that silvered the upper walls and left the narrow lanes below in blue shadow. Several windows remained open. Warm lamplight spilled from them. Someone laughed behind a shutter. The music continued, and Vezin followed it. The town at night seemed different from the town by day. Not darker, but more alive. And that surprised him. He had expected the streets to empty after supper. Instead, people lingered in the doorways. Women talked from windows. A group of young men stood near the fountain. And children who ought to have been in bed darted through a passage and disappeared laughing. And cats seemed to be everywhere. On steps, beneath benches, along walls, watching from window ledges. Vezin noticed them without attaching any particular meaning to their presence. Every old town had cats. The music grew clearer. He turned into the little square he had not seen before, and several lanterns hung from hooks outside of the cafe. Tables had been drawn into the open air, and perhaps 20 people sat drinking and talking beneath the trees. A man near the doorway was playing a violin. That was the music. Nothing mysterious, nothing strange, only an ordinary evening in a small town. Vezin almost laughed at himself. He had spent the afternoon allowing narrow streets and missed trains to unsettle him. Now, he stood beneath the trees listening to a violin while people drank wine around him. What possible danger could there be in that? He found an empty table. A glass of wine appeared before him soon afterward. He couldn't remember ordering it. Perhaps he had. He drank. The violinist began another tune, and Vezin went very still. He knew it. Not the name, not where he had heard it, but he knew what came next. The melody climbed, paused, and before the violin descended, Vezin heard the next phrase inside his mind. The violin played exactly what he expected. He sat forward. The tune continued. Again, he knew where it was going, not vaguely, precisely. A turn in the melody, 3 quick notes, then the long falling phrase. They came exactly as he anticipated. Vezin put down his glass. He searched his memory. A concert, a street musician somewhere during his travels. Perhaps a folk melody he had heard years ago. Nothing came. The violinist finished. People applauded lightly. Vezin did not. He was still trying to remember. Then a voice beside him said, "You know that song." Ilsa stood there. Vezin stared at her. "I was about to ask what it was." She looked toward the violinist. "An old song." "How old?" "Very." "Have I heard it here?" "No." "And you're certain?" "Yes." Ilsa sat in the empty chair beside him. Vezin looked at her. "Then how did I know what came next?" For once, Ilsa had no playful answer. She looked at him so long that the sounds of the square seemed to recede. "You tell me." "I can't." The violin began again. A different tune this time. Vezin scarcely heard it. Ilsa turned toward the tables around them. "Do you like it here?" "Yes." The answer came immediately. Too immediately. Ilsa smiled. "More than you expected." "Much more." "And you still want to leave?" Vezin hesitated. "Yes." Ilsa waited. He laughed. "Eventually." "That is different."
"Is it?"
"Oh, yes." She leaned back in her chair. Vezin watched the people around them. The wine had warmed him. The music was pleasant, and the air smelled faintly of leaves and wood smoke. He felt extraordinarily content. More than content. There was a vitality in him he had not felt in years. He wanted to stay awake, to walk, to talk, to hear another song. He wanted the evening to continue. And stranger still, he felt no self-consciousness about wanting any of it. An elderly man at the next table raised his glass toward him. Vezin raised his own. A woman across the square smiled. Vezin smiled back. Earlier that day he had thought these people were watching him. Now, the idea seemed almost comical. Perhaps they had simply recognized what he had not. That he liked it here. That he belonged among people who preferred quiet streets and long evenings to railroad stations and crowded cities. Belonged. The word appeared so naturally that Vezin did not notice it at first. Then, he did. He looked around the square again. For one strange moment, something shifted. Not visibly, The lanterns remained lanterns. The tables remained tables. The violin continued playing. And yet, Vezin had the sudden sensation that the scene before him was the newest version of something much older, as though other lamps had once burned here, other clothes had been worn, other music had played, and he. And then the impression vanished. Vezin blinked. Ilse was watching him. What? She shook her head.
Nothing.
You were looking at me.
So were you.
He laughed. Again, that ease between them, as if every conversation had begun long before either of them spoke. The violinist played until the lanterns burned low, and eventually the gathering began to thin. Vezin and Ilse walked back toward the inn together. They spoke very little. They didn't need to. That thought came to Vezin several times. They didn't need to. At the end, Ilse stopped beneath the archway. You should sleep, Vezin smiled.
Everyone here is remarkably interested in my sleep.
Something flickered in her expression. Then she laughed. Perhaps because you need it.
Perhaps.
Good night, Arthur. It was the first time she had used his Christian name. Vezin felt the small intimacy of it.
Good night, Ilse.
He went upstairs. The moment his head touched the pillow, exhaustion swept over him. Not unpleasantly. It felt like sinking into warm water. The room softened around him, and the last thing he heard was the distant sound of the violin, or perhaps only the memory of it, repeating that strange old melody somewhere beyond the window. Then he slept and dreamed. He was standing in the town, but it was not the town he knew. There were no electric lamps, no railway below the hill. Torches burned in iron brackets along the walls, and people moved through the streets in unfamiliar clothes. Somewhere bells were ringing. Vezin walked quickly. He knew where he was going. Left at the fountain, down the narrow stairs, through the archway. He didn't hesitate once. Someone was waiting for him. A woman. He couldn't see her face, but he knew her. So he hurried. The dream shifted. Trees surrounded him now. Moonlight moved between their branches. There was music somewhere ahead. The same melody. He followed it. The woman was there. Closer now. Dark hair. A hand reaching toward him. And Vezin felt such a rush of happiness that it was almost painful. He reached for her and woke. Morning light filled the room. For several moments he lay perfectly still. The dream was already disappearing. The trees went first, then the music, then the woman's face, which he had never quite seen. Only the feeling remained. Longing. Vezin closed his eyes, trying to recover it. Nothing. Then he became aware of something else. He felt wonderful. Rested, completely rested. His body seemed lighter, his mind clear. Whatever uneasiness he had felt the previous afternoon had vanished. He stretched beneath the blankets and laughed softly. The Frenchman on the train had warned him about sleep. Vezin couldn't imagine why. He had not slept this well in years. And outside his window, the town was waking. A cart rolled over the stones. Someone opened shutters. A church bell rang. Vezin rose and crossed to the window. The morning was beautiful. He looked toward the railway far below, then toward the cathedral above. And for the first time since arriving, Arthur Vezin did not tell himself that he would leave that day. The thought simply never occurred to him. The days that followed slipped past Arthur Vezin with extraordinary ease. Later, when he tried to remember them, he could never arrange them properly. There had been mornings. He remembered sunlight entering his room, coffee in the courtyard, the smell of bread from somewhere down the street. And there had been afternoons when he wandered alone through the town, sometimes climbing as far as the cathedral, sometimes following the little roads beyond the walls into the countryside. And there had been evenings, too. Long, beautiful evenings. Music from open windows, wine beneath the trees, Ilse beside him. And sleep. Always sleep. Deep, dream-filled sleep that seemed to swallow the night whole. But the days themselves refused to remain separate. One folded softly into the other, and Vezin stopped looking at the railway timetables. Then he stopped looking at his watch. Eventually he realized he did not know what day it was. The discovery should have alarmed him. Instead, he found it amusing. He was on holiday. What did the date matter? And with each passing day, the town seemed less strange to him. Or perhaps he was becoming strange enough to understand it. The streets no longer confused him. He knew which narrow stairway would bring him his quickest way to the market. He knew the little passage behind the church that avoided the steepest part of the hill. And he knew where the old men gathered in the afternoon, and which baker sold the dark bread he preferred. People knew him, too. The waiter at the cafe no longer waited for his order before bringing wine. Women who had once watched him from doorways now smiled when he passed. And children called greetings to him. The old men in the square made room at their table. And Vezin, who had spent most of his life feeling slightly outside whatever company he happened to be in, found himself strangely at ease among them. He laughed more. He spoke more freely. His old shyness had not disappeared exactly. It simply seemed unnecessary here. That was the strangest part. Nothing about the town demanded that he change. Instead, it seemed to permit him to become something that he had always been. Something he had forgotten. Ilse noticed it too. "You're different here," she told him one evening. They were walking beyond the town walls where the hillside dropped toward the wooded valley. The sun had already disappeared, though a band of pale gold still rested along the horizon. Vezin smiled. "Perhaps I should have come here years ago." Ilse looked at him. "Perhaps you did." He waited for her to explain. She didn't. That was often the way between them now. Their companionship had developed with a speed that should have embarrassed him. Instead, it felt perfectly natural. They walked together, they sat together after supper, and sometimes Ilse joined him at the cafe beneath the trees. Sometimes Vezin found her at the cathedral gathering herbs for her mother. They talked often, though afterward, Vezin could rarely remember precisely what they had talked about. What remained was the ease of it, the feeling that conversation with Ilse did not need to be invented. It merely continued. Sometimes she would begin a thought, and Vezin would know where it was going. Sometimes he would turn to tell her something and discover from her expression that she already understood. And occasionally there were silences between them that felt more intimate than speech. Those moments disturbed him, not because they were unpleasant, because they were so pleasant. He had known Ilse only for a handful of days, yet increasingly, the fact seemed impossible. Surely there should have been awkwardness between them, questions, discoveries, all the ordinary work of learning another person. But there was almost none. Instead, Vezin sometimes found himself studying her face and feeling that the real work was not learning it. It was remembering it. One evening, that feeling became impossible to ignore. They climbed to the ruined cathedral shortly before sunset. The place had become one of Vezin's favorite spots in town. Grass grew where the nave had once been, wildflowers pushed between fallen stones, and above them, broken arches framed pieces of evening sky. Ilsa sat on a low wall. Vezin stood nearby, looking over the valley. For a long while neither spoke. Then somewhere below them, hidden among the trees, someone began playing the old melody Vezin had heard in the square. He recognized it immediately. The same rising phrase, the pause, the long descent, and Vezin closed his eyes. This time, the music brought something with it. Not an image, but a feeling. Night air, warmth, excitement. And Ilsa. He turned toward her. She was watching him. Suddenly he remembered the dream. The old town without the railway, torches along the walls, the forest, a woman waiting for him, dark hair, a hand reaching toward his. The details had vanished when he woke, but the emotion returned now with a startling force. Longing, and not new longing, old longing. Vezin sat beside her. "There's something I want to ask you." Ilsa became very still. He told her about the dream. Not everything. There was not much to tell. But he described the town as it appeared to him, older than it was now. He told her about the music and the forest. And finally, he told her about the woman. "I couldn't see her face," he said, "but I knew her." And Ilsa looked away. Vezin watched her. "It was you, wasn't it?" For several seconds she didn't answer. Then she said quietly, "Yes." The certainty of the answer frightened him. He had expected her to laugh, or question him, or tell him that the dreams borrowed faces from waking life. Instead, she simply accepted it. The evening breeze moved through the grass around them, and Vezin looked across the broken cathedral. "You've been waiting for me to remember?" Ilsa nodded. "How long?" She turned toward him. There was no playfulness in her face now, no teasing, only a seriousness that made her seem older than the young woman that he had met carrying supper into his room. "A very long time." Vezin felt a chill despite the warmth of the evening, and Ilsa began to speak, slowly at first, as though she had imagined this conversation many times and now found the reality of it more difficult than she expected. She told him that the feelings he experienced since arriving were not accidents. The streets, the music, the strange recognition of faces, the sense that the town had known him before he knew it. And all of it belonged to another life, an older life. Vezin listened without interrupting. A week earlier, he would have dismissed every word. Now, he could not. Too much had happened inside him. Nothing he could prove. That's what troubled him. If someone had asked for evidence, Vezin had none. He had only the accumulating certainty of his own feelings. And Ilsa. Ilsa told him that long ago he had lived among these people. Not these bodies, not these names, but the same people. Their lives had crossed before, their bonds had been formed before, and some part of them had endured. Vezin looked down at his hands. He wanted to reject it. He tried, but denial no longer came easily. "Then that's why the town feels like home." Ilsa looked at him. "Yes, home." The word frightened him, because it was true. Not England, not the house where he kept his books, not the familiar streets of his ordinary life. This place, these crooked lanes, the cathedral, the force beyond the walls, the feeling was not reasonable. But there it was. Vezin looked at Ilsa again. And you? That was the question he had been avoiding. Ilsa lowered her eyes, and when she spoke, her voice was softer. She told him that their connection had been deeper than the others. They had known one another, loved one another, belonged to one another. Once, long ago. Vezin felt the world around him recede. The ruined cathedral remained. The grass, the evening sky, the distant music, but all of it seemed to move farther away. Ilsa. He had loved Ilsa, or someone who had been Ilsa, and she had loved him. The idea seemed absurd, but instead, it explained something he had been unable to explain from the moment she entered his room. I know her. That first impossible certainty. Perhaps he had. Vezin stood and walked several steps away. He needed distance from her. He needed distance from the idea. But when he looked out across the valley, another memory rose before him. The train, the crowded carriage, the town appearing suddenly above the station, that inexplicable desire. Get off. He turned. Ilsa. She looked up. Why did I stop here? She didn't answer immediately, and Vezin felt something inside him tighten. I wasn't planning to. I had never heard of this place. I didn't even know its name until the train stopped. Ilsa rose. The last light caught her face. You heard us. The same strange phrase she had used before, but now Vezin understood that she meant something more. The town? All of us. Then she added, almost reluctantly, me. Vezin stared at her. Ilsa told him that she felt him long before he arrived, not consciously at first, only as a restlessness, and a certainty that something lost was drawing near again. And as he traveled closer, that feeling had grown. She called to him, not with words, not in any way she could explain, but she had called, and some buried part of Vezin had answered. The railway carriage returned to his mind with perfect clarity. The noise, the English travelers, the little station, his first sight of the cathedral, and that sudden, completely uncharacteristic decision. He had gotten off the train. Arthur Vezin, who disliked changing plans, Arthur Vezin, who rarely acted without thinking. He had seen a town he knew nothing about and stepped onto the platform as though someone had spoken his name. Vezin looked at Ilsa. You brought me here. Ilsa didn't deny it. The thought frightened him, and yet beneath the fear was something else, something warmer. He hadn't stumbled into this place. He had been wanted, called, waited for. The loneliness of his ordinary life suddenly seemed very far away. Ilsa stepped closer, not touching him, only near. Are you sorry you came? Vezin should have said yes. He knew that. Everything sensible in him demanded it. Instead, he looked at the ruined cathedral, at the town below, at the forest beginning to disappear beneath the gathering dusk, then at Ilsa. No. The answer came quietly. But it was true. Ilsa smiled. Not triumphantly, almost sadly. That frightened him more than triumph would have. There's more, Vezin said. Her smile disappeared. He knew immediately that he was right.
What aren't you telling me?
Elsa looked toward the forest. For several moments she seemed to be listening to something Vezin couldn't hear. Then she shook her head. Not yet.
Why?
Because remembering that you belonged here is not the same as remembering what you belonged to. Vezin felt the words settle between them, and he waited. Elsa said nothing more. Below them, lamps were beginning to appear in the town, one by one, warm squares of light opening in the blue evening. The old melody had stopped. In its place came another sound, faint at first, a long cry from somewhere among the roofs, then another answer from farther away. Cats. Vezin looked toward the town. For the first time, the Frenchman's warning returned to him with a real force. Because of the sleep, and because of the cats. He turned back to Elsa. She was no longer looking at him. Her eyes remained fixed on the darkening forest. Vezin followed her gaze. Nothing moved there. Nothing he could see. Still, something about the trees seemed different tonight, as though the darkness had gathered beneath them earlier than it should, as though the forest were waiting for night. Vezin felt Ilsa's hand slip into his. The gesture was so natural that for a moment he didn't react. Then he looked down. Her fingers rested between his, warm, familiar, and once again, with no image attached to it, memory moved somewhere deep inside him. He had held this hand before. This time, he didn't tell himself it was impossible. He closed his fingers around hers. Together they walked toward the town, and Arthur Vezin understood at last why leaving had become so difficult. It was not simply that the town wanted him to stay. Somewhere inside him, he wanted to come home. After the evening at the cathedral, something changed. Not in the town, in Arthur Vezin. He felt it almost immediately. The streets looked the same. The fountain still whispered into the mossy basin. The baker opened his shop each morning. The old men gathered beneath the trees. Ilsa carried dishes through the inn and herbs home from the cathedral. Nothing had altered. And yet, Vezin could no longer pretend that he was merely a traveler who had stayed too long. He had accepted something. Not completely, not willingly, but enough. He had belonged here. The words remained with him, and once he allowed them into his mind, the other things began to follow. At first, they were small. He began noticing how extraordinarily quiet the people of the town could be. He had noticed it before, of course, the landlady's soft movements, the waiter who appeared beside his table without warning, Ilsa's nearly soundless steps. But now, the quality seemed to be everywhere. People moved without announcing themselves. A woman might be standing at a window when Vezin glanced up, though he could have sworn that the window had been empty a moment before. A man leaning against a doorway would disappear while Vezin's attention wandered elsewhere. And children slipped through the narrow streets without making a sound. And always there were cats. Vezin began to notice how often people and cats occupied the same spaces. A woman sat sewing in a doorway while a black cat watched from the step beside her. An old man slept in the afternoon sun, with a gray cat curled beneath his chair. Children crouched beside them in alleys. Cats watched from windows while people watched from the rooms behind them. Sometimes Vezin would catch a pair of eyes looking at him from the shadow of a doorway, or for one confused instant, could not tell whether they belonged to a person or an animal. Then he would look properly and laugh at himself. Of course he could tell. And yet, the thought remained. One afternoon he was sitting alone in the public garden when he became aware that the place had been filled around him. It happened exactly as it had before. When he arrived, only 2 benches were occupied. Now, there were people everywhere. An elderly woman beneath a tree, 2 young men near the fountain, a mother with a child, a girl sitting on the wall, and none of them seemed interested in him. But still, Vezin knew they were aware of him. This time, he watched them. Really watched them. And because he watched carefully, he noticed something he had missed before. They rarely approached anything directly. The young men crossed the garden in long, easy curves. The women, beneath the tree rows, stretched almost lazily, then wandered toward the gate as though she had no destination at all. The girl moved sideways along the wall before dropping lightly to the ground. Nothing about it was unnatural, not separately, but taken together. Vezin remembered the Frenchmen on the train, because of the sleep, and because of the cats. The word entered his mind with such force that he nearly laughed out loud. Cats? Surely that was all. The stranger had planted the idea. But ever since, Vezin had been unconsciously searching for it. A perfectly ordinary explanation. He stood, almost at once, and the garden began to empty. By the time he reached the gate, half of the people were gone. Vezin looked back. The remaining faces had turned elsewhere. No one watched him leave, and that evening he stayed at the inn. He had no desire for the cafe or the music in the square. For the first time in several days, the companionship of the town felt oppressive. He ate supper alone. Ilse brought his meal, but she seemed distracted. Twice she glanced toward the open window. The second time, Vezin noticed. "What is it?" "Nothing." "You keep looking outside." Ilse smiled. "It's a beautiful night." And it was. The moon had risen above the roofs, and the air was unusually still. From somewhere far away came the faintest suggestion of music. Vezin looked at Ilse, and she was listening to it. He could see that now. "Where is everyone going?" Her eyes returned to his. "Everyone?" "The streets were full half an hour ago. Now they're almost empty." Ilse began gathering the dishes. Vezin reached out and stopped her hand, not roughly, but firmly enough that she looked at him. "Ilse." For several moments neither moved. Then Vezin asked the question that had been troubling him since the cathedral. "What did you mean when you said there was more?" The playfulness left her face. He continued. "You told me I belonged here. You told me you called me back. But there's something else." Ilse slowly withdrew her hand. "Yes." "What?" She looked toward the window again. The music was clearer now, only slightly. A thin melody drifting somewhere beyond the houses. Ilse stood. "You should stay here tonight." Vezin frowned. "Why?" "Because you aren't ready." "For what?" But she was already moving toward the door. "Ilse!" She stopped. Vezin waited. When she looked back, something in her expression disturbed him. Not fear exactly. Anticipation. "You wanted to know what you belonged to." Her voice was very quiet. "Tonight, you may begin to remember." Then she left, and Vezin remained at the table. For perhaps 10 minutes he did exactly what she had told him. He stayed. Then the music began again, and this time there could be no mistaking it. The old melody, the one he had known before hearing it. It floated through the open window, faint and distant. Vezin stood. He crossed the room. The street below was nearly empty. A woman came out of the doorway opposite the inn, and Vezin recognized her. The elderly woman who often sat sewing near the window. But there was something different about her now. She no longer moved with the careful stiffness of age. She stepped into the moonlit street lightly, almost eagerly, and she looked once in each direction, then slipped into the narrow lane. A few moments later, a man appeared from another house, then 2 young women, a boy Vezin had seen at the market. None spoke, none called to one another. They simply emerged, one by one, quietly, all moving in the same general direction, toward the edge of town, toward the forest. Vezin watched. The sensible thing was to close the window and go to bed. In the morning everything would look ordinary again. Instead, he reached for his coat. He left the inn. The street was cool beneath the moon. The music had stopped again, but Vezin knew which way to go. And that troubled him. He hadn't seen where the others had gone after leaving the street. Yet, when he reached the first turning, he didn't hesitate. Left, down the steps, across the little square. Through an archway, he moved quickly, and with every turn, the sense of familiarity deepened. This was different from knowing the town by daylight. At night, another map seemed to lie beneath the one that he had learned. A map his feet understood. He reached the old wall. Several figures were ahead of him, and Vezin slowed. He didn't want them to know he was following. The thought came naturally. So did what followed. Without consciously deciding to do it, he moved closer to the buildings, into the shadow. His steps became quieter. His breathing changed. He waited until the people ahead had passed through an opening in the wall. Then he followed. Only after he had done it did Vezin realize how easily it had come. He had moved as they moved, softly, indirectly, without sound. A small thrill passed through him. Not fear, pleasure. That frightened him more. Beyond the wall, the road descended toward the forest. More people were gathering there, and Vezin recognized many of them. The waiter from the cafe, the baker, one of the old men from the square, a young mother he had seen carrying a child that morning. People of every age. People who, by daylight, had seemed perfectly ordinary. But they did not seem ordinary now. Their daytime reserve had vanished. They moved with an energy Vezin had never seen in them. There was laughter, and low voices, quick movements, and beneath it all, expectation. Vezin remained hidden near the wall. A cat passed close to him, black, lean, its tail lifted as it went by. Another appeared farther down the road, then another. They moved in the same direction as the people. Vezin watched them disappear toward the trees. Again came the Frenchman's voice in memory. Because of the cats. Vezin felt suddenly cold. Someone laughed nearby, and he turned. 2 women were coming down the path. One of them was Ilsa. Vezin pressed farther into the shadow. He didn't know why he hid from her. Perhaps because she had told him to stay behind. Perhaps because for the first time, he wanted to see Ilsa when she did not know he was watching. She looked different. Not physically. Nothing so simple. But the quiet young woman from the inn was gone. Ilsa moved with an ease and confidence Vezin had only glimpsed before. Her face was bright, alive. Her eyes seemed almost to shine in the moonlight. She laughed at something the woman beside her said. The sound stopped Vezin's breath. He had heard that laugh before. Not at the inn, not in the square. Somewhere else. Somewhere. Impossible. For one instant, the road vanished. Trees, firelight, music. Ilsa running ahead of him. Her hair loose, turning back, laughing. Then the image was gone. Vezin gripped the stone wall. Ilsa had stopped. Her companion continued several steps before noticing. Ilsa turned her head, slowly, toward Vezin. He was hidden completely in the shadow. She could not possibly see him. Yet she looked directly at the place where he stood. Neither moved. Then Ilsa smiled. Not the same smile she gave him over supper. Not the teasing smile he knew from their walks. This smile was different. Older. Wilder. And Vezin knew with an absolute certainty that she had found him. Ilsa said something quietly to her companion. The other woman continued toward the forest, and Ilsa remained behind. Vezin stepped from the shadow.
You knew I was here.
Yes.
How?
Ilsa didn't answer. The moonlight caught her eyes, and Vezin thought again of cats. He hated himself for it.
Where are they going?
Ilsa looked toward the trees. Somewhere that you used to go with us. Us. The word struck him. Vezin remembered the cathedral. The question he had asked. What aren't you telling me? He looked at Ilsa.
What were we?
She came closer. Vezin felt the old attraction immediately. But tonight, there was something else inside of it. Something almost physical. An awareness of her that seemed to bypass thought entirely. Ilsa stopped in front of him. You already know.
No. You feel it. That isn't the same thing.
For us, it was. Ilsa reached for his hand. The moment her fingers touched his, the road seemed to sharpen around him. He heard things he had not noticed before. Leaves moving high in the trees. Footsteps far down the path. A whisper from somewhere behind the wall. The tiny scrape of claws across the stone. His senses seemed suddenly awake in a way that they had never been before. And with that awakening came a rush of exhilaration. He wanted to follow the others. The desire appeared so strongly that it frightened him. Not curiosity, not anymore. Longing. The forest waited below. The music began again, and Vezin's heart quickened. Ilsa watched him. You remember this. He shook his head, but his body leaned almost imperceptibly toward the sound. Ilsa saw it. Arthur? There was tenderness in her voice, and warning, both at once. You asked what you were. Vezin looked at her. Ilsa's fingers tightened around his. One of us. For several seconds, Vezin heard nothing but the music. One of us. He thought of the town by daylight, the people watching without watching, their silence, their strange grace, the cats in the doorways and windows. He thought of himself slipping through the streets tonight, how naturally he had hidden, how easily his feet had known the way. What does that mean? Ilsa hesitated. We lived differently then, more freely.
Ilsa.
She looked at him.
What were we?
Behind her, the forest stirred beneath the moon. You would call us witches. Vezin stared at her. The word seemed absurd. So absurd that he almost laughed. But he didn't, because Ilsa was not laughing. Vezin thought of every story the word carried with it. Old women and charms and broomsticks, superstitions invented in frightened villages. None of it belonged to the woman standing before him. And yet, the word remained.
Witches?
That is what people called us. People? Those who were afraid. Vezin looked toward the forest. And the cats? Ilsa's eyes moved back to his. Something changed in her face. So slight, he almost missed it. That was answer enough. Vezin stepped away. Ilsa reached for him. Arthur. He stopped. Her voice had changed. The wildness was gone. Now, She sounded frightened. Not of him. For him. "You should go back."
"To the inn?"
"Yes."
"And you?"
Ilsa looked toward the forest. "I have to go."
"Why?"
No answer. The music sounded again. This time, Ilsa reacted to it visibly. Her head turned. Her entire body seemed to listen. And Vezin understood. Whatever call he felt, she felt it more strongly. Ilsa looked back at him. For a moment, the woman he knew and something much older seemed to exist together in that same face. "Go back, Arthur." Then she turned and ran. Vezin watched her. She did not run like a woman hurrying down an uneven country road at night. She moved lightly, swiftly, almost without sound. Within seconds she reached the trees, and she was gone. Vezin stood alone beneath the moon. Every sensible instinct told him to return to the inn, lock his door, pack his bag, leave at first light. He even turned toward the town. Then the music changed. A faster rhythm now. Voices rose beneath it, laughter, and something among those voices. "Ilsa." Vezin stopped. His heart began to pound. Not entirely from fear, that was the terrible part. Something inside of him answered. Something old. Something he had carried across years, perhaps across lifetimes, without knowing it was there. Arthur Vezin turned slowly back toward the forest. The road lay empty before him. He knew Ilsa had told him not to follow. He knew that whatever waited beneath those trees belonged to the part of the story that she had been afraid to tell him. And he knew something else. He wanted to see it. More than that, some buried part of him wanted to join it. From deep within the forest came another cry. This time, Arthur Vezin understood it not as a warning, but as an invitation. And now, the old French town lies quiet beneath the moon. The lamps burn low behind shuttered windows. The ruined cathedral stands pale above the rooftops. And beyond the last stone walls, the forest waits in darkness. Arthur Vezin has followed the music farther than he intended. He has remembered more than he expected. And somewhere beneath those ancient trees, a part of him is still listening. For tonight, though, you need not follow any farther. Let the forest remain at the edge of the town. Let the music grow faint. Let the moonlight soften across the old stone streets. And imagine the inn waiting quietly beyond its archway. A warm room upstairs, the scent of herbs and supper lingering below, and the night settling gently over everything. Close your eyes. Rest now. You are safe. You are loved. Thank you for listening to Nikki Woo Cozy Stories, created by Nicole T. Woodard. May your dreams be gentle and your sleep be deep.